everybody. Welcome back, welcome back. I hope you're all enjoying yourselves and you had fruitful discussions and breakout sessions. I was in the ERG in Challenging Countries session, and it was really remarkable. Some really personal stories shared, powerful stories, and concrete ideas as well, and tips and advice for people. So I hope that was reflected across all the breakouts, and I'm sure it was. Now, unfortunately, I have to start with some bad news. There are just 90 minutes left of the conference. Can I get an oh? But we have two tremendous panels coming. Can I get a yeah? Okay, it's average, but I'll let you off the hook. Okay, to kick off this afternoon session, I'd like to do two things. The first thing is to draw your attention to the stop, start, and continue cards, which were on your chairs. Put those to one side for the moment. Don't tear them up, put your gum in them, stub anything out in them, because we will be using them later on. If you don't have one, because I understand there was a bit of a shortage, so not all the seats at the back do, maybe later on there are some spares and we can get them to you, or just share later on. All right? The second thing I would like to do is ask for your round of applause again for our Executive Director of Workplace Pride, who's going to give us a very cool announcement. Yes, now you can clap. David.
So thanks a lot. Everyone hear me? Have you had a good time today? Yeah, fantastic, fantastic. I won't be here long because there's a lot of important things still to discuss. But another very, very important thing, as Ken has said, important announcement. Some of you may be aware that the concept of gathering all the information that we've done over the past 30, 40 years in this movement has tried to get some momentum, at least in this country. And we've never gotten that to that point, but we have now. So I'm very happy to announce the beginning of the creation of a World Queer Museum in Amsterdam. Yeah. Workplace Pride is part of an initiative with the COC, which is the leading LGBTIQ plus human rights organization in this country, and ILIA, which is the International Gay and Lesbian Archives. But I'm not going to say any more. I'm going to introduce one of the shepherds of this movement. Her name is Anna Timmerman. She's going to tell us more about it. Anna.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Thank you, everybody. As mentioned, this is a project that we're doing jointly with Workplace Pride and COC Netherlands. And I know that Paul is here, the director. Where are you? There, so that in case you want to know more. And my colleague Mark Noyons is here, because this is really something that we're doing together. So come and find us if you want more information. Now, a queer museum, an LGBTIQ plus museum, or as it was called in the past, a homo museum, has been a dream that has been around for a long time. And because it's a dream, I want to invite you to dream with me. I want to invite you to relax, sit back, and close your eyes. I hope we have a level of safety where we feel comfortable. Just close your eyes and visualize what would an LGBT museum for you look like? Think of what you're seeing, a place where you feel proud and safe and where your history and belonging is being kept. And I want to invite you to enter this space, walk by the registry and the lockers, and go to the Grand Gallery. And imagine what you want to see in that gallery. Who is on the wall? Whose picture? Which names from our history should we never forget? Maybe there's art, maybe there's sound, maybe there's music. You imagine what you want to leave behind for the next generations. And now I have to invite you back at the Railway Museum in Utrecht. But I want to thank you for dreaming a bit with me. I've been talking about this museum with a lot of people in the past month, and I asked them to dream, but I also asked them about what they feel are the biggest challenges for our community. And there are three things that very often mentioned. The first one is discrimination, exclusion, and health issues related to that. The second is the lack of representation. And people say there is representation of LGBT people, but it's often people who look like me, and then most of the time the male version. So there's a lot of representation that is lacking. And the third thing that people mention is the division within our community, with all the different letters and identities, and between generations. And the idea, of course, is that a museum can contribute to a solution of these three issues. Because a museum would be an incredible opportunity for education and fighting discrimination. It would be a place where we can build real representation, tell our own stories. And it's a place where we can come together and have dialogues within our community and, of course, outside of our community. And these three issues, as we've seen today, are of course also at the heart of COC the Netherlands, which is the oldest LGBTIQ+ organization that's still working. They've been around for over 75 years. It's at the core of ILIA, which is an archive which has been around for 2 generations, collecting the history, culture, and activities of our community globally. And it's also a place where if you are in an LGBTIQ+ network in your company, you can actually share your archive with them. They can keep it for you for next generations and generations to come. And we've seen today how much it is at the core of workplace pride. So it's not a real surprise that these incredible organizations have found each other and have decided to create this museum. Now let me tell you why I'm here. I was born 26 years after the Second World War, and it was in a time in my youth that history was still quite present in our society. And when I was a young girl, I was living in Amsterdam. My mother was an artist, and she fell in love with a Jewish journalist. And I think I was 5 or 6 years old when I was playing with a little train. We had a little model train, or how do you say that? Sorry? Marklin. So a train with a sliding door. It was yellow. It had belonged to my grandfather. I was really not allowed to play with it. But it's like a little kettle car. And I was playing with it and putting my Lego in it and taking it out. And my stepfather must have seen me doing this. And he came to sit next to me. He pulled me on his lap. And it was the moment that he wanted to tell the story. So he said, when I was a child, even younger than you are today, I've been in such a train with my parents. They took me away in just a train just like this one. And I think for me, being brought up with the stories of the Holocaust and the realization that even in your own society, you're never safe, that you have to continue to fight for your rights, has made that I studied history and I spent my whole life working in human rights sector and also, of course, as a volunteer, and trying to build a society or help to build a society where everybody can be who they are. I'm also part of the first generation of lesbians in the Netherlands who could marry legally and have children legally. And I'm very aware that I've lived a very privileged life and that I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. I had a quite easy life because others suffered, because they fought for our rights. People who lost their houses, lost connection to their families, lost their jobs. And we are here today because of those people. But I think you must have been thinking, when you were dreaming about the museum, you maybe also thought about those giants. And their names are being lost. Maybe we don't even know the names of the people who made our lives possible. And we're living in a time today where we see that there's as David was talking about this morning, are we doing enough for what's happening now in the world, in America, in Poland, and in Uganda, as you mentioned? So I think it's time that if you can, we need to step it up a little, and we can always all be part of this idea to tell our own story, to own our own story, so that we can tell it to the next generations, and that we can also create a rooting for ourselves. Because if you don't know where you come from, you cannot really build a future. You have to know your past to know what you want the future to look like. So that's what we're doing with Workplace Pride, ILIA and COC the Netherlands, but we cannot do it alone. I need all of you to join us. And I'll show you a little bit where we are. Yeah, because this is our timeline. We're just starting in the sketching phase, so that's also why we can still dream. We've found these 3 organizations who want to do it together. We're creating what I call a tsunami of support. We're looking for companies and organizations who dare to step it up and say, okay, I'm going to support this museum. Just by speaking out and show that we can show your brand, that you say like, yeah, I want to be part of this. And the next phase is going to be very important this year. We're going to work on a visibility study. We're going to have all kind of work groups to think about the content of the museum, what kind of building do we need, what kind of organization do we need, all these very practical things, so that in 2024 we can really launch the organization. In 2025 we hope to have a blockbuster exhibition in Amsterdam to really show what this is going to be like, to give people a taste. And we hope to open in 2026, because that is the year that marriage equality started in the Netherlands 25 years ago. It's also World Pride, so it will be an amazing happening if we can all make it happen. But to be able to do this, as I said, I need you. And I'm going to go back, because please take out your phones and go to the QR code. And it will lead you to a web page on the website of Workplace Pride. And it will has a little Google Docs form where you can leave your name and your email address, so I can put you on our mailing list, which we still have to develop, but it's coming very soon. But also, you can mention there if there are things that you would like to do with us or for us, or where you can help us. Because especially in this phase, there's so much that you need if you don't have a real big organization. We have to think of a name, we have to get a logo, we have to work on marketing communication, we have to do events, but we don't have a venue, so maybe you want to host one. So really think about this very creatively and be welcome to join us. Because what's so remarkable of our community is that if we join forces, we have everything. We have all the knowledge, expertise, time and money and power among us to realize dreams. And our community has done it before. So I hope you'll join us in the dream for World Queer Museum. And then I want to see all of you in 2026 at the opening. Thank you very much.
Much. And how exciting is that? A physical home in Amsterdam, a kind of, yeah, wonderful. And a real battle cry there for progress. So thank you very, very much. Beautifully spoken, Anna. Okay, we are going to move on with the first of 2 panels this afternoon. And the first one is entitled All Aboard the Academic Angle. So please give me a round of applause. Yes, always. Okay, thank you very much. The Workplace Pride Chair for LGBT and Workplace Inclusion at Leiden University, Professor Janneke van der Toren. Professor Toren. Thank you, Professor Toren. And the Senior VP of Research Networks and Academic Ambassador at Elsevier, and also co-chair for Workplace Pride, Michiel Koolman. Michiel. Yeah? Oh, yeah, you can use this one. That's fine as well. It's okay, we'll leave that one there for the audience questions at the end. Yeah, we have 20 minutes for our conversation, and hopefully there will be some time for audience questions as well. Before we zoom out and consider, I guess, like the impact of academic research, the positive impact it can have in terms of pushing forward progress, let's zoom in on your 2 institutions. What does LGBTQIQ inclusion look like at Leiden University to start with?
Oh, interesting.
Are you satisfied?
Interestingly, I don't actually research it at my own institution, but knowing my institution, it's not that different from elsewhere, I think. So there's still a lot to do. We heard today about the brave space that students have initiated at Leiden University, and that's a great start, but that really is also necessary. We have a very active LGBTI network, employee network, but yeah, there should be much more visibility. There's a lot of questions about data collection. We're not systematically assessing inclusion and inequalities, so a lot of work to be done.
Yeah. And is it remarkable even that you managed to get funding to do the research that you do?
Yeah, I think it is. And it was also on the part of the university an important priority. So they were definitely excited about it and did this together with Workplace Pride. But they also realized that, that it was necessary.
Okay, so it was a big thing for them to put money into LGBTIQ.
Well, the money
research.
comes from the corporates.
Yeah.
Not from the university, but the space comes from the university and the attention to it.
Yeah.
The fact that they wanted to establish a chair, which is not something they do every day. So I do think that that says something about their commitment. But I also still think that, the insights that we have from research, among other things, is not yet seen enough in my own workplace either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that seems to be a general theme coming out of a lot of the conversations. Need to engage more visibility. Michiel, at Elsevier. Do you have your own mic? You don't have
No, I think
Oh,
it was
so we
lying
do
there.
need
Yeah.
that. I'm sorry,
No
man.
worries. Anyway,
Thanks, David.
we started around 10 years ago to put LGBT workplace inclusion on the map. It was a bit up and down, but I think we're in a pretty good state now. One of the things that really helped us was the workplace-wide global benchmark, where we scored pretty mediocre for the first 5 years, and then our score went up. And I think it really reflects what you also see in research, that it takes around 8-9 years to change an organization around. And for us, it was more or less the same. And the last couple of years, we have had a 90+ score for our global benchmark. What also really made a difference, apart from that we had this very vibrant Elsevier Pride groups everywhere. We started one in Chennai at the time that homosexuality was still criminalized in India. We started one in Rio de Janeiro because one of our colleagues was actually beaten up in a homophobic incident. But what also was a game changer, we got a new CEO. She was young, she's Turkish, Muslim, and she really said on the first day at work, diversity and inclusion is a pillar of all my strategies, and I want everybody to be themselves at Elsevier. And if there are people that don't make that possible, there is no room for those people.
Wow.
So she was in business, and that really was a game changer as well. So I would say, in summary, the executive leadership, the benchmark, and then, of course, the enthusiasm from our Pride chapters really made a difference.
Yeah. Wow, that's fantastic to have someone so outspoken. In terms of the benchmarking, sometimes I worry with surveys that it can also be a reason for people to think, oh no, we're good with we're good on the scale, and sometimes I worry that people aren't being ambitious enough. Is that a concern?
We learned a lot about self-ID today, right, in a breakout session, and we also talked about this, I think. I think that we see it also in our research, that people think that sexual orientation and gender identity is, first of all, not relevant to a workplace, and that's a real barrier, I think. Or things are just already going strong, right? So we don't have inequalities. I think especially in the Netherlands, we tend to think this, when this is really not the case. We really need space and visibility. Self-ID is also privacy related, right? People find information very sensitive, and so that's another barrier. But I often also think that those opinions come from a place of discomfort, where maybe this idea of it not really being necessary is more a heteronormative attitude than an explicit belief.
Yeah. Okay, I'd like to come back to self-ID later on, but first let's talk a little bit about the data that you do pull together. What is that telling us about the best ways for organizations to achieve inclusion?
Oh yeah, interesting. Yeah, I think we often focus on best practices, right? What kind of events should we organize? What kind of policies should we have? And I think what our data really shows is that we need best methods. So we really need integrated D&I policies across the board, not just HR, and in HR, not just in flow or promotion or inclusion policies, but really across the board, also focused on outflow. We need systematic policies, so we really need to focus on how our goals are smart, how they're connected to the vision of the organization, a little bit connected to what you were just saying, that we take into account support that there is, focus on active supporters, of course, but also take into account where resistance may come from, and that we measure and monitor where we are and where we want to go.
And where is the resistance usually coming from? Maybe Michiel, where do you see pushback?
Well, so what we see is, and what I mentioned earlier, usually the executive level is on board. And of course, when you look at people who care about diversity and inclusion, who are active in ERGs, like employee resource groups, they are on board as well. In between, you see a large group, I would call them the neutrals. I mean, they will say the right thing. Yes, diversity inclusion is important. But if you would ask them, so what is important for you to make, your objectives? They will say, I want to make my targets, my production targets, my financial targets. And I don't hear across many organizations say, I want to be an inclusive leader. For me, it's important that everybody can be themselves in my team. I want to think what I can contribute as a manager or with my team towards the overall diversity and inclusion goals of my organization. That has to change. And it's especially important for us because we are a minority and we must get the vast majority on board. You cannot change the culture in an organization if you do not get the majority with you. And that's why allyship and active allyship is so important.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of executive leadership groups they're very good at talking the talk. But when it comes to funding, it's a bit of an economic downturn in some sectors. So is the LGBTIQ budget the first to get nixed?
I mean, it's really interesting you say that because during the financial crisis, we saw that diversity and inclusion was actually cut left, right, and center. What we see now during the pandemic and post-pandemic is a very strong ongoing investment in diversity and inclusion and also around LGBTIQ+. And we see this in our membership. We grew 80%. So people in the boardroom decided, yes, we're going to invest time and money into the membership of Workplace Pride, much more so than in the past. So in that sense, I'm quite optimistic.
And what's changed, do you think? What is the research telling? Why now then?
I think a lot of activism has really helped, right? So I think that there's just more awareness. I also do think that a lot of people still only talk the talk. So I think the actual behavior is still behind. And it's true at the board level. I think among employees, there's still a lot of neutrals. So when we look at the research, what's interesting in two ways, I think, what you were just saying is correct. We see in research we did in about 20 companies that there is 25% of employees who really are supportive of their D&I policy. Only about 15% that is actively resisting it or that is not
So 25 fully supportive, 15 resisting?
15% resisting, so much smaller group than you might actually think. But the largest group is the neutral group. So these are people that do not really, they're not very positive nor negative. They also do not express their support in either direction. And that's really the group that you want to get the attention of because they're the ones that you can move into that active supporter group.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I think society-wide we're living in this kind of populist, polarized, post-truth world, and is that reflected in that spread? Do you think this 55%, the neutrals?
Not really, because it's not that you have both active supporters and active resistors, right? That would mean it's really polarized. Actually, we see the largest group is in the middle, who are, they could be going in either direction. They're the ambiguous group, but they could be moved into that active support group. And I think that what we see in more qualitative work that we've done is that a big reason for them being in the neutral group is because they don't know the policy. So we really need more communication, really make people know what we're doing in our organizations so that they can actually have an opinion on it. Because I think it's also that they don't know.
But then, I mean, what are we talking about? Like sending emails to people?
Sending
gathering?
emails, being visible, making people part of the solution, right? Getting their input. It's often very top down. It's thought up at the top. We do not assess the needs of employees, and we also don't involve them in shaping policies.
At
doesn't
Elsevier,
sound
we have
like-
town halls. So every month, CEO is there. It's for all staff. Every town hall, our CEO will talk about diversity and inclusion. She will really emphasize this is important. Different aspects, different angles, but it is always on the agenda. So the employees really get the message. This is important. This is not going away.
Yeah. And are these figures based on assessments in the Netherlands or just in the Netherlands?
These were 20 companies in the Netherlands, yes.
Right. Is anything done internationally?
Not by me, and I actually do not know of any research that has really looked at support for diversity policies as they are implemented. So we know a lot about whether people support diversity and inclusion, or policy at the abstract level, but we don't know a lot about whether they support the policy as it is implemented in the organization. What we see, for example, in international research is that people from minority groups or minoritized groups tend to be more supportive of diversity and inclusion. But in our sample, we see that they're actually more critical of policies as they are implemented. And that's also, I think, a really important insight for organizations. Don't assume that everybody's just going to be on board. Do not overestimate the resistors either, right? Focus on the positive, but also really think about including people in the shaping of your policy.
Yeah. And I think I can imagine, but maybe the research is different, if you do make the assumption that you can actually push people from the neutrals into the resistors.
If you do make that assumption, that would be bad.
If you assume that they'll be coming along with you with the policy, and you don't bring them along because then they feel like, oh, we're being told what to do, and the initial reaction is, well.
Yeah, maybe. But at the same time, I also think we often we put a lot of energy into avoiding the resistors. So to really be scared of resistance, when that's really also important information, right? Why are people resistant? It's often not because they are prejudiced only. It may be because they have other needs that are not met and that they feel that something's taken away from them, which could be existing alongside.
What do you think, Michiel? Do
Well,
we
I was
avoid
thinking
that
actually
conversation?
that, a couple of years ago, people were all rolling out in companies unconscious bias trainings. And it turns out that actually it was not so effective. And Janneke will, of course, can back it up with the research. And I saw it also in practice. People went in as a group of colleagues, but they went out and they thought, wow, I'm really different, right? I'm the white, straight male all of a sudden. And they are the black colleagues or the gay colleagues. And so what really works actually is emphasizing the positive. So do inclusive training, inclusive leadership training, think about psychological safety. That's something that really resonated at Elsevier. It's based on research done at Harvard. It's pretty simple actually to roll out. And when we started rolling it out, our CEO did it first for her own team, and it was really a bad score. And she shared it with everybody. And also, of course, a year later, she did it again, and the score went up dramatically. Because she was a very open leader. And that is, I think, that is this positive aspect which you emphasize. And I think then you get many more people on board. Nobody will object to work in a psychologically safe environment.
Yeah.
Nobody wants, minds to be seen as an inclusive leader. But it's much more sensitive when you say, well, I think you have some unconscious biases. You better work on it. That's a very negative message.
But to bring people on board, of course, you need them physically there so you can talk to them. And now in this kind of post-COVID world, everyone's having video calls, not as many people coming into the office. Has that had an impact as well on progress?
I think it is harder to engage people when they work from home. We also saw that COVID disproportionately affected minoritized groups of employees. Both because they already had a harder time health-wise, etc., mental health, also because they tend to work in more precarious jobs, which were more affected by COVID. And the working from home, I think, yeah, it is still possible to engage people, but you need different strategies. And I also notice myself that I find that I need to go into the office at least once a week and be present and meet everyone for myself to feel engaged with my team. So let alone how they must feel, right, if I'm not around or if their colleagues are not around. So I think it's not necessarily the case that you can't do it when people work from home, but I do think that you need that, connection now and then. So we often now actually very consciously have a sort of town hall day where once a month we work at a different location where we all have a nice lunch together, and we really do it very deliberately so that people then the rest of the time are energized and charged for the week and feel connected.
And is it clear to companies now, is it clear enough as to what the consequences are if they don't become more inclusive?
Yeah, I don't think so. So I also think that we often focus on what are the benefits from inclusion and not enough from what are the downsides if you sort of miss the boat on that. And also, I think in our research, for example, we see how insidious it is, right? Heteronormativity and how it really plays out at all these different levels. One of them being one's identity integration. So we did some research, how Zhao did this, where she looked at whether people, how people look at their professional and their sexual identity. And we see that LGBTIQ plus employees separate these more. There's more conflict between their professional and sexual identity, more at work than at home. So their home identity or non-work identity and sexual identity are better integrated. And it's different from non-LGBTIQ plus people. So it really shows how even at the self-view, how you look at yourself is impacted specifically in the workplace because of what we call hetero-professionalism. So this idea that to be professional is to be heterosexual. Yeah.
So Erica shared some data from McKinsey, right? So there was like a bonus if you're more diverse as an organization, especially around race and ethnicity or around gender. But this also shows there's a penalty to pay. So if you lack diversity, so you're all white, straight men, you perform worse than the market average. Your financial results are worse. So there is definitely a penalty to pay if you do not embrace diversity and inclusion.
Yeah. Why? So why is? I mean, this is so like black and white. Why is there still a lack of diversity in a lot of executive leadership then?
Good point. I mean, you have to start. You have to have to change come from the top, but also to have people rise to your organization. So it's very easy to say, to a group of straight white males who are now in charge, you all have to change overnight.
Or make space.
Or make space, exactly.
It's not hard to say it.
Yeah, it's very
Easy to say.
It's easy to say, but it's very difficult to make it happen.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how easy it is to say it as well. Like you've got to feel safe. Do we have any questions in the audience for our two? No. No questions.
They're ready for the drinks.
No. Yes, we've got a question here and a couple here. They pop up. May I borrow one of your mics? Thanks. Thanks.
So my question for this morning fits right in. I'm trying to get. I've heard in the first talk with the lady from IBM also, like it really helps engagement if we do DE&I in the company. What I sometimes experience is that I arrange disengagements because there he is again with his gay agenda or talking about migration background or. So how can we prevent disengagement by still, what I hear also a lot is repeat, continue it. How do we get the neutral group on board?
Thank you.
Yeah, I think this happens because people see it as something that's external, that is not really part of the workplace, right? And that's really where we need to start, to show that this is what we are and what we need to embrace in the organization. So I think that's where it's the heteronormative attitude, I think, that places your work as something that you can choose when really this should be a priority for your organization. And you should not be the only one that is trying to engage people, right? It should come from every angle, yeah.
And I would emphasize the value aspect. So your organization stands for certain values. And you should keep emphasizing what those values are and what are the implications. One of the implications is that your organization aims to be more diverse and more inclusive.
Okay, great. And what's your name? Where are you from?
Hello, my name is Joy and I work with Manpower Group. And we were lucky enough to take part in the research of Janneke as well. And I have a question also regarding the more neutral group. Should we as organizations really strive to make the group choose to be pro or con for diversity? As in that case, you asked, like, are we then not polarizing as everyone has made a decision to be pro and con? Like, what's the disadvantage of having a certain percentage of neutrals in your organization?
Well, I think you should really try to get people to be supportive. Of course, the taxonomy that I present is one that we made as researchers, right? I don't think that people necessarily categorize themselves so clearly in one of these two sides. I also recently heard a very interesting thing at Leiden University Symposium about polarization, that really we feel that things are polarized when actually what we're hearing is more minoritized voices become heard. So that resonates with me as well, and aligns a little bit with what researchers have called dancing with resistance. So really using resistance as information. That doesn't mean that you only do things once you know that there is support, right? That you stop doing things because there might be resistance, but really understanding what is happening. So I think, and that can shape policies, of course. So I think that there is no, it is not bad to get people to voice their opinion. It's the only way that we can influence the norm, I think. And hopefully by showing that what you do is right, you will get more supportive people.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think we have to leave it there. Professor van der Toorn and Michiel, thank you very much. Okay, from a panel rooted in academia to one rooted in civil society, civil service, and the corporate world. It's our time for our next panel, and I'd like another big round of applause for our four panelists: the CEO of Hivos, Anne Jellema, the EVP of WBCSD, all the letters of the alphabet, nearly, Pepijn Rijvers, marketing lead for Northern Europe and the global category lead at Unilever, Frank Gallestein, and the inspector at the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs and former ambassador to Singapore and, I found out, Brunei, Margriet von O. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you. Yeah. Great. Okay, I'm going to ask you to share some mics. I think we have. There you go. Okay, great. I would like to start with you, Margriet. As Dutch ambassador to Singapore and Brunei, you were, I guess, on the front lines of diplomacy when it comes to flying the flag for Dutch values, as well as managing relationships locally. When I'm thinking specifically of Brunei, for instance, I can imagine that there is at some point some friction between the two. How do you approach that?
Thanks. It depends. I've heard also in different sessions. I got a lot of support from my minister because the ministry really cares. I'm really proud that we are now part of Workplace Pride with all civil servants in the Netherlands on the global Dutch level. What I've done in Singapore, I wanted to raise the gay flag, but it wasn't available there. So I ordered one 2 by 3 meters in the Netherlands, and I raised the flag. And I put it on social media, which actually is a little bit so it could go sideways. But what I found is that I really helped the local community, because whether you want it or not in the Asian context, as an ambassador, you're a high VIP. And if you showcase that, then you can really make a statement. And what I've done next is starting to invite some locals and ask them, do you know others who work in the LGBTIQ plus scene, for an informal session which was not open, because it was a safe space that I could give and actually also honor them by good food and respect, because most of those people don't have a lot of money and are not respected. And that's something which you could give from the Dutch perspective. Going to Brunei, which is a totally Islamic country, although only 65% of the population is Muslim, I've noticed when I talked, for example, to a local minister there, that he said that, you know, gay rights then with the Sharia were a big issue. So that's why I came to talk to the government about it. And one of the ministers told me, yeah, one of my nephews, he's gay, we all know it, no problem, you know. As long as he does it in his house, it's okay with us. And on Twitter, there was a Twitter storm with George Clooney, like they're going, and it was true that they imported a lot of stones from Saudi Arabia and that they had sort of practiced how to stone somebody. But it was all for their local publicity. But what could help me is that I told them, you don't get any more investments and you need that money. So you better try to change your tune a little bit, which they've done, because they had no idea that the rest of the world cared, because it's a very secluded community. And I think that's one of the things that we can do, that we bring the outside world to people who are inside the smaller community and give them a good example and help them to dream or to change.
That feels like a really, yeah, worth a round of applause. It feels like a robust, pretty robust approach to do something like that. But at the same time, are there certain like red lines that you can't cross as a diplomat? I mean, can you fund local NGOs, for instance?
Very often, if you do fund, you won't help them. So there are a lot of red lines. What I did, I screened a movie about Lady Galore. Maybe you know him, a Dutch drag queen, in a cinema in Singapore. But it was on invitation only, and we had a big party. But it wasn't allowed for me to ask the public, because I couldn't open it up. But sometimes I have to admit it could have gone the different way. I knew some people in government, so they said, well, she's a nice lady, she bought the cookies for my kids, so maybe we'll give her some leeway. So that's what you try to do as a diplomat. But I truly believe in it. I have a lot of cousins who are lesbians, so it's part of my genes, of the family. That's what I always told them. And they're very nice, loving people. So, and I have to ask you all if you can follow it's called Dutch Rainbow Family on Instagram. I have a lovely colleague, Remco. He's the Dutch ambassador to Thailand. He's married to Carter. They have a lovely family, and they never talk about homosexuality. They just are a loving family. And what they do as a role model is really the diversity that I'm so proud of my organization.
Yeah, lovely. Frank, is this kind of approach something, you know, as a corporate, what are your red lines? Because you have an very international organization. Some of your brands are particularly outspoken. I'm thinking of Ben & Jerry's, let's say, very outspoken. But others are not. How do you deal with that in a local context, in areas where rights are not as progressive as others?
Yeah, I think it starts from the top. So we have a vision that we want to become a beacon for diversity and inclusion, and specifically for the LGBTIQ plus community. It means that we want to amplify their voice in society. And we have a CEO and a CFO who are unapologetic and super strong supporters. So that helps already a lot. And then, yeah, we are active in more than 190 countries across the world. And we categorize them across 4 axes. I have to say it in the right way. Social inclusion, social exclusion, legal and illegal. And that's how we cluster them. And then you have zone 4 countries where yeah, it's illegal and social excluded. And zone 1, like where we are here in the Netherlands. Zone 1, you can do everything. Zone 2 and zone 3, you can work with ERGs to amplify the voice. And this is literally, these are instructions to the teams on the ground, what to do. But even in zone 4, you can invest a lot in education and knowledge within the Unilever office, because that's the safe space that we want, and all our employees need to be safe. And as a beautiful example, I think last year we silently launched the missing part in the world where we didn't have a Pride network yet, which was the Middle East. And I think the person who launched it went also to the conference that Workplace Pride organized at the time in Dubai. And next week, when Pride Month starts at the Dubai Town Hall, Pride is the topic. And that happened in a year. So I think there's a lot of progress. And also if I speak to senior leaders who go to markets that are zone 4 categorized, when they speak to the younger generation, and Unilever has, especially in the offices, quite a young population, they're all asking, why aren't we doing more? So I hope I heard something, I think Anna said it, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. I really hope also for the younger generation to drive that change further.
But if I listen to you, I mean, that younger generation, they want more, so why aren't you giving them more?
Well, that's what we're trying to find out now. What's the best way to navigate the local boundaries that we have? And it's a very fine line, because now I'm talking about the corporate part, but indeed if you talk about the brands and Ben and Jerry's, yeah, that can go sometimes massively wrong in terms of the backlash that you get. So it is difficult. It is really, we're doing a lot, we're not doing enough, not at all, but it's also a very fine line, and there's so many stakeholders that you have to manage.
Okay. I mean, at the same time, just to push you a bit, you've been active in Zone 4 countries in probably for many years, and you're still not doing enough, apparently. So why is it taking so long?
I think you have to take a zoom out a bit. We're doing a lot since the last 5 years. And I think I'd love to answer the question again in 5 years. I hope we've done much more then. But if you looked what we did 10 years ago, I mean, if we had drinks with the Pride Network, it was, well, the 3 people here in the room and myself. And if you see where we are now, and I think it's the same for the local discussions there. So many things are changing, but it needs time.
Yeah. Okay, and Anna or Anne? Anne, we need time. Corporates need time. You need time to lobby, and it's very difficult at any point to lobby for the rights of those who are disenfranchised and in very difficult situations in general. What's it like specifically for LGBTIQ inclusion?
I think I would say that none of us are doing enough, and the reason is that we are at such a dangerous time around the world. The global pushback against LGBTQI rights is gaining momentum and force, but day by day in many different countries. So what I have realized being here today, and thank you very much, David and Workplace Pride, for having me here, I have realized that civil society and business and government need to work together in a much more proactive and creative and bold and coordinated way, because that's what the other side is doing. That's what the other side is doing. And we need to pick up the pace. I think, yes, it's true, these things take time, but the other side is moving very, very quickly. So what's happening right now in Uganda, I think some of you were in the Free to Be Me session earlier where our partner Levi talked about the incredible violence and hate and discrimination that is taking place in Uganda. People are literally being forced out of their homes. Organizations are being raided and closed, and their leaders are being put in prison. And there is the threat hanging over them of legislation that would impose the death penalty. This is the situation we're in, but we're seeing other countries pick up, literally copy-paste, the same type of legislation in Africa and in other parts of the world, right? All in the name of protecting the family. Protecting the family. And their propaganda and their social media campaigns and their influencing campaigns are very, very well coordinated. As my colleague from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs mentioned in another panel, in Uganda, business and civil society and progressive governments like the Netherlands did work together quite successfully to stall this legislation. And that has bought some much needed time for the LGBTQI community in Uganda to figure out their next steps.
So is that a model that then needs to be just amplified, replicated?
Absolutely. We need to do this not only in Uganda, we need to do it in the dozens of other countries where similar storm clouds are gathering.
Yeah.
And we also need to think globally. How do we work globally and proactively to change the narrative?
Describe in a bit more detail what worked about that collaboration to stall that legislation, and what can other people here cherry pick and say, okay, we're going to try that?
Yeah, great question. I think the thing is that as government and business and civil society, we all have different strengths and weaknesses that we can bring to the table. So there are certain things that it's very difficult now for Western governments to say to their counterparts without getting a lot of pushback that you're being colonial, don't tell us what to do, this is not your place anymore. So there are things that the Netherlands can do using its diplomatic soft power and things that they cannot do. Similarly for business, similarly for civil society. As civil society, we face the threat of losing our registration and being thrown out, for example. So we need to work out what are the different strengths and weaknesses, what are the different comparative advantages that we can each bring to the table, and then trust each other. I think that's also a big issue. Often business and civil society do not have a history of working together on advocacy. So how do we build that trust to be, even when we don't have 100% agreement on all of the issues, we can still work together where we have a shared interest and shared objective.
So, but sorry, just to push and be clear, what was it that was so effective about the partnership that you built together? Was it data sharing? Was it like financially? Did you create some kind of fund to fund a campaign? I don't know. What specifically worked about the collaboration?
Yeah, a few things. So I think the Netherlands was quite proactive in bringing together the diplomatic community to say what can we do behind the scenes.
Okay.
Some major multinational corporations took the initiative to actually speak out, ironically, in a stronger way than the governments could. Right? So they put out a very strong statement, which was really helpful in changing the discourse. And as civil society, with some financial support from the Netherlands and other governments, we have been working behind the scenes to make sure that the LGBTQI organizations and rights defenders are able to put together their strategies, both for immediate safety, which has been a huge issue, but also for the longer term, like preparing a constitutional challenge should the president of Uganda eventually sign this bill into law. So it's that, finding the different areas where we have comparative advantage. I think the fourth pillar that still needs to be built is the longer term one of how do we create a pathway to economic dignity and acceptance for LGBTQI people. And that's something that, all that you are all doing as individual companies to promote inclusion for those who are already in the workplace is really, really important. But as my colleague from Positive Vibes pointed out earlier, a lot of the constituencies that we work with are completely excluded from the world of formal work. And that means that they do not have that respect and dignity that work brings. I mean, in my earlier career, I worked for a long time on getting girls into school in Bangladesh. It was a similar situation. Women and girls were among the most marginalized constituency in Bangladesh. They had no say, they had no voice. So we worked for many, many years to try to change that and get girls into school. But the single biggest thing that brought change was that there were suddenly economic opportunities for women in the garment industry, right? So the rate of girls' education went from 14% in 1990 to 70% by 2015. And a huge amount of that was because these economic opportunities had opened up.
Okay.
Right? So I think that's the fourth area where over the longer term, we need to work much more closely together. And that's why we've been working with Workplace Pride on developing a mentoring program, for example, for young LGBTQI people who are not in formal employment and who don't even have it in their minds that they could ever work for a company like IBM or Unilever.
Okay. I'd like to move on to you, Pepijn, and this report that your organization has put together. Tackling inequality, I think we've got the slide up for it shortly. An agenda for business action, which is a kind of detailed analysis into the role the private sector can play in addressing inequality. Can you share a few highlights from that report?
Yeah, sure. Certainly. Thanks for having me. So the context for doing this report, the World Business Council focuses on ESG broadly and the issues around energy and climate and decarbonization and growingly, luckily, the issues around nature and basically the destruction of biodiversity are getting more and better understood. Unfortunately, as a result, the human agenda is lacking. And we really saw a root cause, at least from a business standpoint, the lack of visibility and understanding on what the role of business is and how they could play that role. So as a result, in 2021, we started the Business Commission to Tackle Inequality, which was let's say, a multilateral collaboration between civil society organizations, academia, and CEOs, representatives of our memberships, Unilever being one, and Alan Job being one of the more involved CEOs in the creation of this report as a co-chair. Essentially, just for clarity, today we talk a lot about diversity and inclusion, and for us it's always been diversity, equity and inclusion, meaning a fair distribution of opportunity, a fair distribution of wealth, a fair distribution of perspective. And it's from that global context that you bring that makes that so important. Because it's quite clear that we don't have an equitable society. I think in the past couple of years we've seen probably the most dramatic shift of let's say, private wealth into, away from the bottom of the pyramid into the top. And even the Netherlands, even though it's one of the leading countries maybe, we now for the first time see more than 1 million people living under the poverty line, which of course is ridiculous that that's the case. So when thinking about the role of business, it's actually there's a really crucial role to play for businesses because they basically determine income, they determine opportunities, they determine growth and the investment in people. And there's also, they have a unique opportunity because they can essentially, as organisms, decide way faster, way quicker, and with much more determination on how they eradicate, through policies, how they eradicate basically the lack of equal distribution, equal opportunity across both internal, but also external. So what I would call out from this work, basically there are 7 areas where we feel that any business can start doing something. I do want to recognize, relating to the story of Unilever, we need to recognize it's a journey, and we need to recognize that diversity and inclusion and equity is not core business for many businesses. So we want to basically hero anyone making positive steps, and then at the same time doing everything we can to accelerate.
Before you go on to the 7, sometimes I feel like we're a bit too quick to praise companies for doing things that they should have done 20 years ago, or that is just really basic.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think the difficulty is Anne, correct? Anne was talking about how, for instance, there was a seismic shift in the access to education for girls in Bangladesh the minute that there was an incentive. And I think that incentive, we should not underestimate the power of incentive. So I feel with you, but at the same time trying to be rational and approaching this really as a systemic issue that we have globally. We need to recognize that the incentives actually need to align, and when they do, that's when
absolutely fan them and amplify them. Yeah.
So basically, what are those 7 things that businesses can do? C-suite endorsement, not only by the CEO, but certainly also in the way that the company gets governed by non-executive oversight, etc., is crucial and an important starting point. then there is an internal dimension and an external dimension. The internal dimension focuses very much on talent and talent journeys, like how are they being stood up, how do companies recognize underrepresentation of the various minority groups that they can identify. Pay. How do they address an equal distribution of wealth, an equal distribution of opportunity, and an equal distribution of recognition among the workforce? And this is luckily an exercise that can be driven by data. And many companies like data, and it's very easy to find the real truths of a business by using data. So there's really nothing standing in the way to do this. And then lastly, culture. It needs to be ingrained, and I think the leadership of the lady CEO from one of the previous panelists.
Ellen?
Yeah, exactly. So leadership voicing quite clearly what the goals of the organization are and what the perspectives and attitudes are is crucial. At the same time, culture goes way deeper than just that. It starts at the top, but it needs to be embedded through and throughout. So that's really important. And then there's an external dimension, supply chains. Companies have, and this is the incentive piece, companies have an enormous amount of influence, way more maybe than they think, over their supply chains. And because there's many, hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of companies and also individual workers are dependent on basically them procuring from these supply chains. So basically work with your supply chains to increase awareness, to increase capability, to increase tooling, and to increase support. At the same time, also in the marketplace, think about how your products deliver service to your customers. Also here, there are important inclusionary effects to be had, whether it comes to inabilities, whether it comes to accessibility, affordability, branding, the marketing and the positioning of products are all areas where material and valuable work can be done. And then lastly, companies need to carefully structure how they engage with communities. So how do you make sure that there is a representation and a voice institutionalized across the way that companies make decisions?
Okay. All right. Very useful, I think, for people to hear all of that. And I'd like to also go back to you, Margriet, and talk about the influence that the government can have. When you talked about supply chains and the importance on companies realizing how much influence they have over all the partners in that supply chain and to change their behavior, there's currently legislation going through the European Parliament to try and create this kind of supply chain transparency. But a lot of Dutch companies, including like the big, is it F&O or something, are really pushing back on it because they don't want to be obliged to have such transparency. What kind of influence can government have in terms of offering a vision and really kind of saying, to corporates, you have to do this?
Well, we try to do it on a European level and also tell the corporates it's in your best interest because you need to look into your end consumer. And they are, if you look at generation Gen Z, they won't buy anything which is too old-fashioned and not diverse. So it's in your own interest, and we help you to protect you against competition which is not fair from outside the European Union. So you should be very grateful. And we don't do it on our own. It's not that just the Dutch get singled out. We do it on a European level. And actually, it helps you with good marketing because you can tell the others, we're a little bit better. And maybe our price is the same. So try a different sort of marketing. And I've done my MBA and I've been at the Rotterdam School of Management. So in the end, they tell them you should be grateful that you have a strong government, because actually it's with strong governments that you have a better society. And I strongly believe in that. And that's why I'm also very proud that I can be here today together with my colleague Bahia, who will do the keynote later.
And from your experience in all the different countries that you've worked in, and now you inspect other ambassadors. So she travels all around the world, basically giving ambassadors scores in Dutch ambassadors scores. What have you seen? What do you think is the key to bridging the gap between civil society and the private sector? to push like progress when it comes to inclusion?
Yeah. All ambassadors are very kind to me. I don't know why, but whenever I whenever I arrive, they treat me. So incentives are really helping. I think if I look at Dutch ambassadors, how I review them, it's how open are you to people who are not VIPs, who's in your network. I asked them to invite me over to dinner, so I said, well, so nice that I could come over, and who's at your table? And I'm interested to see, do you know the NGOs? And I look in their books, who did you have for dinner? And not only what did you eat, but why, and what's the purpose? And I want the tax money spent on, the ones who don't get free dinners all the time. Because there's lots of others who host the other ones. And I try to also score ambassadors who try to be a little bit more risky, but then do an interview and tell a little bit about their own, parents. For example, they divorced and the father married a man, and what impact it has, and that it's just part of the family life. And then you get the storytelling going, because I think we are sort of masters of our own fate, and I like to keep it with my own story. Like, what helped me to help the gay community is to be honest about myself. And although I have a lot of cousins who are lesbians, I've tried, but I'm very heterosexual. So. Which is a pity. I like diversity, but I think as an ambassador, I was taught that I should drink wine and offer wine all the time. But because I've been open to others, in the end I said, actually, I don't like wine, I like water. So I'll offer you a glass of wine, but can I please drink water? And I've changed that. But it helped me also because I helped the community to also help myself and become the true me. And I think that's what we all need, and it will be a better world.
Oh, well, thank you. Okay, before I open it up to the audience, another question for you, Frank. We were talking about helping one another. From your point of view, what support would you like from civil society in order to help push develop progress in challenging countries, should we say?
Yeah, that's interesting. So I think in Zone 4 countries, we can do a lot on what we invest in education and knowledge of our Unilever staff. How can we bring that further into that country? I think there's a lot there, because the programs there, it's all about raising awareness, trying to get more understanding for one another. And I think that has a universal value, and you don't hurt people, but we need to find a way to massage that into the society without offending people. So I think there we can do a lot together.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And it starts with awareness. So if we start with training and then psychological safety, maybe that's already then the next step. But let's start with sharing knowledge.
Yeah. Questions from the audience. Oh, sorry, John, come on. One question. Okay. Okay, you were first up, so I'm going to come to you. Sorry, thanks. What's your name? Where are you from?
I'm Marijn. I'm with IBM. Thank you very much. Question. I much like the UN definition of social sustainability. One is content, programs. The other is framework. So the framework that you build to kind of build on influence, relationships, etc. So if we want to get better organized as an LGBTIQ+ community, and we really want to take this to the next level, how then could we, for example, better exercise together with our companies, our influence with the African Union or the Arabic Liga? Because we have representation in the EU with the Commission, with the Parliament, with the Council, with the UN institutions, trade, World Bank. How do you think we could do that with the organizations in Africa, in the Middle East, some in Asia? On driving progress there, on that level, what do you think we could do?
Thanks. short answer, I'm
Yeah.
afraid. That's a big question, but...
I think we can do a lot behind the scenes from the government level and have closed sessions. Very often, their silent diplomacy works best. And actually, maybe a lot more is happening than people know. Because what I've learned in my job, there's my Instagram account and there's my other part of the job, which I don't discuss because otherwise I won't reap any results. And I sometimes want to shout out loud, look what we've achieved, and you can't do it. So maybe we can discuss later. Then I have my short answer. Everybody's happy, and there's lots that we can do together.
Great. Thank you very much. Round of applause, please, for all of our panelists. Thank you. Okay, now as we draw to the close of the conference, there's been a lot of discussion, a lot has been shared. I'd like to take a little bit of time for you to reflect on everything that we've discussed and try and think about the actual things that you can do from tomorrow when you hit the office on Monday that could have a positive impact. And I'd like to do that using those cards that were on your chairs, okay? It's an exercise called Stop, Start, and Continue. I'd like you to consider what do you think that you as leaders, allies, pioneers, activists should stop doing? So what should you stop doing? What have you learned perhaps from today that has made you realize, you know what, that's not working, I've got to stop that. And the next thing is obviously, what should you start doing? What has made the most impact on you and you think would be specifically for you effective? What should you start doing in future? And what is already working so that you will continue doing it and perhaps even amplify it? Now, I'm just going to give you, like 3 minutes for this, and let's do it in silence. So it's like a genuine, you're really thinking about it. No conversation, just make it personal, make it real, authentic. You heard what Ellen said, be authentic. And take that time. We're going to collect everyone's cards later and hopefully do something productive with that and share some ideas with you later. So take your time. 3 minutes starts now. Okay, we will leave it there. I feel awful. Some people are like having to whisper. They don't want to be called. Okay, really well done. Thank you very much. If you need more time, then take it afterwards to fill in the card. All right? Now, it is time for our final keynote address to bring this terrific international conference to an end, although we'll hear from David afterwards as well. So I'd like you one last time to give a massive round of applause to the Dutch Human Rights Ambassador, Tazib Lee.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's truly wonderful to be here, and thank you, Aquino, for your empowering way of moderating this program and your positive energy. And also thank you, David, for hosting this international conference in this amazing museum, which has an enormous convening power, I noticed when I stepped in, but also to stimulate us to think and move on when we are talking about the importance of open and inclusive workplaces. I really feel honored to be here together with my colleagues, Margriet, who you just, she was just on stage, but also Anna Roos, I don't know where she is, somewhere hiding, right there. She is actually our driving force at our ministry when it comes to the promotion of equal rights for LGBTIQ plus persons at our ministry in the Netherlands and around the world. I'm very honored because the last 4 years I really saw at so many occasions how the Netherlands is really a proud partner and supporter of workplace pride. Worked with David at many occasions. But I'm also moved to be here. I unfortunately couldn't come here in the morning because I was chairing myself an international conference on human rights in The Hague. But sitting here and listening to you all, how each and every one in their own ways are really working hard to try to accomplish an open and inclusive workplace for all employees. That really touches me a lot. And also how we say that we also ourselves are changing through this exercise. And this also shows that diversity and inclusion are really never-ending business and require an active and transformative mindset. Speaking of the Netherlands, let me first say that I'm extremely proud that the Netherlands is a staunch advocate for equal rights for LGBTIQ+ persons around the world, especially, for instance, at the United Nations. We are known to be strong advocates and pushing it high up on the international agenda and really trying to bring about change in different parts of the world. I'm also proud that the Netherlands is the world's largest government donor to LGBTIQ+ organizations. And I notice that many other countries look at the Netherlands and get inspired and empowered to also proceed on that road. But yeah, what we do abroad also makes us think, what do we do domestically and at the workplace? And yeah, all this is really great. And I notice that because I'm the one going often abroad and speaking to others. But if you want to be credible, we have to make sure that our house is also in order. We must be credible in order to have effect. And therefore, also at our ministry, we are more and more becoming aware that we really must practice domestically and at the workplace what we preach abroad. And I really think a very empowering and clear illustration was last week's signing by the Dutch government of the Workplace Pride Declaration of Amsterdam. Some of you were there, and it was a beautiful day. It was Idaho. It was a lot of music, celebration. But this was very significant. It's a first step, and of course we need to put it into practice. And maybe we should have done it years ago, but the fact is we did it, and we're moving ahead. And what is really good about this declaration, it contains a set of clear, transparent, and accountable goals to measure progress towards LGBTIQ+ inclusion in the workplace, whether we're moving in the right direction or whether we have to change some things in order to be going towards the right direction. And the amazing thing is also it applies to 140,000 employees across government, including employees who are working at our 120 outposts around the world. But it also extends to all the countries of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, so also Aruba, Curaçao, and St. Martin. So this declaration, the Workplace Pride Declaration of Amsterdam, is an important and visible step forward. But, as I said earlier, it would really be an illusion to think that we in the Netherlands now have things all sorted out. We, of course, continue to face our own challenges too, and we need to be frank about them. That's how we ultimately grow. To give you 3 examples, for instance, we are witnessing an increase in disinformation campaigns about transgender persons, gender affirmative care, and comprehensive sexual education in schools. Then 2, according to COC the Netherlands, 7 out of 10 LGBTIQ+ persons in the Netherlands experience discrimination or violence, either verbally or physically. And 3, we're also realizing we still need to take some more steps. We're not there yet, especially when it comes to bodily autonomy for intersex persons, gender identity, self-identification, and banning conversion therapy. So we have to continue rolling up our sleeves. Having said all that, and being frank about it, I do regret that the Netherlands has moved down 1 place in the ILGA Europe's annual rainbow ranking. We now rank 14th out of 49 European countries. And it just goes to show that guaranteeing LGBTIQ+ inclusion and rights require constant attention and continued efforts. We need to be on our toes and be active. But at the same time, okay, sometimes we drop a place or maybe even more places. And I think it's also important to recognize that growth is not always linear. Like, for instance, last year we dropped 22 places when it came to media freedom, but now we're back up 22 places. So sometimes it goes a bit bumpy, as long as we're moving towards that direction where we would like to go, both in and outside the workplace. Now moving on to my own employer, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. In the past years, my ministry has taken a number of significant steps to really try to increase diversity and inclusion for all members of staff, including LGBTIQ+ persons. And I would like to share some examples with you. At my ministry, we have a dedicated diversity and inclusion team that promotes LGBTIQ+ inclusion, gender equality, cultural diversity, inclusion of employees of all ages, and also inclusion of differently abled employees at the workplace. We also have, and I'm very proud about that, an active LGBTIQ+ staff network as well, appropriately called Out There, which safeguards the interests and needs of LGBTIQ+ persons. Out There also seeks to raise awareness of stereotypes and misunderstandings that still exist in the workplace and provide guidance on counteracting them. And this includes also listening to the experiences of our LGBTIQ+ colleagues posted abroad and locally hired colleagues in LGBTIQ+ unsafe countries. Because we're not only interested in experiences of people working in safe countries, but especially in unsafe countries. Then also my ministry participates in the Workplace Pride Global benchmark to learn how it can improve its LGBTIQ+ policies and practices. And then moving to a different area, but very much related to diversity and inclusion, my ministry has also commissioned an independent investigation into racism, both at the department in the Netherlands and at all its diplomatic posts around the world. And you've probably heard or read the results that were made public at the end of last year. The findings on widespread racism were shocking to many. But by facing our past, we can pave the way towards a more inclusive work environment at our ministry. And I must say that I'm also encouraged that slowly, awareness is growing. Awareness that we have to change the way we think, judge, speak, and act. And perhaps also what Margriet was saying, being more ourselves, using our strengths. But it also means that we need to become more aware of our biases, especially our unconscious biases, which we all have. And that's why I'm also very happy that our ministry is now very actively offering a D&I and bias training for all members at our ministry to actively seek and learn about our own biases. I followed this training in the beginning of the year, and I must say I'm extremely grateful that I became more aware of my unconscious biases. I didn't know them, and now I'm very aware of it. And also whenever I do something, I also try to also include others or really to tackle my own biases. Another thing that as the last example, is it's not only how the ministry at the executive level should change things, also we employees need to be active. And that's why I think it's wonderful that we have changed our annual performance review cycle. And now when you speak to your line manager, it also includes a discussion on enhancing employees' participation in diversity and inclusion and tackling racism in the workplace. So a discussion about what I have done, what you have done, what we're all doing. We also need to change and do something. Then, of course, our ministers and secretary generals and director generals, they also try to inspire and lead by examples. They all do it in their own way. For instance, last year on Idaho Day, our foreign minister raised the flag for the first time, a rainbow flag at our ministry. And then he spoke very strongly about the importance of human rights, diversity and inclusion, and that he expected us also to live up to these goals at our workplace. And then our Secretary General this year also did something very interesting. Together with Germany and Mexico, he organized a reception for all employees at our ministry and at all the embassies based in The Hague to really celebrate diversity, inclusion, and also to amplify these important messages about LGBTIQ+ inclusion and diversity. Anna was beautifully speaking about the power of visualizing, and I think we're speaking a lot about a more inclusive work environment. And I think it's really empowering to visualize having the end in mind. What are we exactly talking about? So I'll try to quickly paint a picture of a work environment, and it very much connects with this panel we just had. So a working environment that embraces and promotes diversity, and I'll just call it for easy sake, Workplace 2.0. So when we see that once all members of staff experience that they can be their full, authentic selves, we see that something magical happens. Workplace 2 appears. Suddenly it becomes possible. And what are the effects? We are happier, we perform better, we are more creative, more innovative, we are working harder, we are enjoying life more, and also our sense of loyalty to our employees, to our employers increases. And we are less likely to take sick leave or leave our company. And whenever we meet our friends and family, we are talking enthusiastically how much we are enjoying working for this particular employer. So also increasing our employer's public image. It sounds so basic, but it needs repeating, it needs visualizing. And we really also know, and you know it better than I, when we hide part of ourselves, that kills growth. It's the enemy of innovation. It slowly but surely erodes human capital. And in the global race for talent, human capital is increasingly scarce, as we just also heard earlier this afternoon. As societies age, the battle for young professionals will also be influenced by how organizations deal with diversity and inclusion. I found it compelling that studies have shown that 83% of the millennials feel more empowered and valued when they work at a company with a diverse staff. And Generation Z even goes further. They are even one step ahead. 80% of them looks at companies' commitment to diversity and inclusion before they even choose an employer. So this is the future. That's the way how things are evolving and changing. And I find it very inspiring and also giving a lot of energy. And you will see that recruiters predict that these trends will only exacerbate with future generations, particularly as the labor market tightens. If we want the best people, we need to look at how we create diverse and inclusive workplaces where everybody can be themselves and at their best. Being themselves meaning regardless of their gender identity, gender expression, sexual orientation, sex characteristics, professional background, age, religion, cultural heritage, ethnic identity, physical abilities, and so on and so forth. These are all human-made labels that set us apart from each other. But we're all human. We all belong to humanity. In closing, I'd like to pay tribute to the vision the world first expressed 75 years ago in Article 1 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It says, all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. And that's how it is. Human rights are for all of us, both online and offline, regardless of who we are, who we love, where we're from, what we do, and what we believe in. And I'm so proud that today's conference really helped us in our aspiration to create more open, diverse, inclusive, and safe workplaces around the world. Because only together, when we join forces, can we really ensure that every member of staff at our workplace can be their authentic selves, safely express themselves, reach their full potential, and simply, also thinking of Tina Turner, simply being their best. I think she was really fantastic. Her spirit amazing. So simply being our best. So I just want to close. I hope this conference will really generate more opportunities for enhanced engagement and new partnerships, and that we inspire and challenge each other, because when we are creative, we can be more effective, and we can all do something. We can all be drivers of change, and that's why we're here together. So thank you so much.
Beautifully spoken. Thank you very much, Ambassador. We are at the end pretty much. Thank you very much, everybody, for all of your inspirational stories. I've certainly had fun. It's been a pleasure moderating this. I've learned a lot. I've made new friends. So thank you very much for that. For the final word of the day, David Pollard, back on stage.
Thanks very much, Iken. I'm sure you're all exhausted after such a heavy intellectual day. But I have to say, this is probably, I think, our 14th or 15th international conference like this. And this time I've been really surprised by the showing of actually vulnerability of organizations and individuals, and how that vulnerability can actually turn into strength as well. So very, very powerful. And this morning, when I put up on the stage, are we doing enough? My answer, at least right now, is maybe not yet, but we're well on our way. And I think after this event, we can give ourselves a round of applause for that. Now, I know we all want to drink, so I'll go through the thank yous very quickly, starting with Iken. Thank you so much, man. Fantastic moderation. Really good. Okay. And we all know with such an event like this, it's certainly not just me alone, but a huge amount of work from a lot of different people. So I first of all would like the Workplace Pride staff to come up on stage, please. Oh, okay. So the... Brian. Now, a lot of work has been done, of course, from this group, but there's more of us. So I'd like to now, it's going to fill the stage. I'd like the boards to please come up, Workplace Pride Board and Advisory Board. And our Free to Be Me team from Manila and from Nairobi. Come up on the stage. Where's Graham? Okay. And last but not least, our volunteers for today. Join us up. This is dangerous. Yeah, look at them. Look at, there's a lot of... Yeah. Look at them. Crazy. And now everyone here that's helped make this possible, please give these people a round of applause. Thank you. All right, thank you all very much. I'd like to now invite you to a drink, which I think we all need, right out there. And one last word, the cards with the stop, start, continue, you can put it in a punch bowl on the way out. Thanks so much.